Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. Leaning on the Lord and anchored to the rock. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. We're shining bright and thinking outside the box. Gotta stay lean, gotta stay quick. Those Templar cyborgs are pretty slick. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox. It's the end of the world, so do your part. Gotta stay strong, gotta stay smart. Healthy, healthy, Fennec Fox.
All right, welcome to part one. This is about supplementation. So in the health page, you're going to see a video titled 9 Reasons Why You Should Supplement. A lot of important points there. Make sure you check them out. That's more of a deep dive. Today we'll be talking a little bit about that. But nevertheless, I have lots of articles on supplementation, vitamins, minerals. I've been taking supplements in therapeutic amounts for 20 years of my life. So my journey is one big case study. A lot of people believe supplementation isn't needed or that it's a scam. And there's some truth to both of these in some sense because health is a spectrum and there's a lot of things to consider. The first thing is that there's a lot of misinformation in the world of supplements. And that's for many reasons. Well, the first one is that they're not like drugs where you have patents and all these elaborate legal schemes. So there's not a lot of profit in like selling vitamin A or, vitamin C. So there's not going to be a lot of studies looking at vitamin C because it's free. Nobody's incentivized to do studies, which is sad, but that's the human flesh and greed at play. So there's not a lot of studies most of the time. There's still a lot of research, but the point is that compared to like drugs, like well-established drugs, the budget for studies is much lower in general. So that's number one. Supplement companies have gotten around this by patenting their formulations or manufacturing processes to make them look special. And of course, these seem like they're necessary. Like when you see like BioPure trademark, version of this, it's like, oh, that's a special thing. Like, well, it might just be some process. It's not necessarily doesn't mean that it's better than anything, but that's why it requires investigation. So there's that to deal with. There's lots of bias studies because many supplement companies fund their own studies. So there's a lot of poor research, just like in drug research. And there's also poor quality studies where they're not double blind, they're not peer reviewed, not relevant because they're using cells or animals. These things could be useful. They can. But you have to remember that, and I have a whole article in the book about this, about how to make sense of the research. Okay, cell studies are somewhat useful, but they're not something to extrapolate to the organism. When they're doing cell studies, they're testing the concentration of a given thing on a cell. Well, imagine that cell doesn't live in a petri dish in your body. It lives in connection to other cells. And so you're not going to reach that concentration of the thing. So the things that you find from cell studies are largely to be taken with a grain of salt. Animal studies are a little more relevant, but even those, is not entirely relevant. The rat studies are very common because rats are very, they have a lot of genetic, I think the difference is like 97 or 98% or something. They're very close genetically to human beings. But again, that 2% difference or whatever it is what you get between a rat and a human being, right? So there's that too. So that's also something to take with a grain of salt. So there's a lot of poor quality studies. That's why there's a lot of misinformation. Even the decent studies that are done, they're often irrelevant or blown out of proportion. An example, they found that B vitamins or vitamin E or vitamin A cause cancer. There's like studies that have made these claims, which of course are bogus. B vitamins and vitamin E and vitamin A do not cause cancer. The problem is that these things are often misinterpreted, or they're taken out of context, or they're looking in certain ways that are not natural and likely. For example, with vitamin A, they looked at beta carotene. There's one study I'm remembering now with like lung smokers, people who were smoking and were taking like high dose vitamin B12, or they were taking beta carotene, not vitamin A retinol, which is the animal form of the vitamin Beta carotene is what you get from like carrots, which, it's a chemical, but it's not as bioavailable and useful as retinol, vitamin A that you get from animal products. And in high dosage of these supplements, it was correlated to a lot of nasty issues. But is that because vitamin A gives you cancer? No, you can't make that conclusion. You shouldn't be taking vitamin A beta carotene in high amounts. It's not designed to be doing that. You should be supplementing vitamin A retinol, and not even that much, like 5,000 units is what I take. Nevertheless, same thing with B vitamins. The B vitamins like B12, B6, B9, they are methyl donors, and the study was finding that basically if you're a smoker and you're flooding your body with all these chemicals, right, especially if you're doing vaping, and at the same time you're taking high dose of these B vitamins that are, think of it like food, energy for cells. Well, they're also food for cancerous cells too. That doesn't mean if you take B12, you're going to get cancer. It means that if you're taking a high amount of B12, like these high doses, like 5 milligrams or something, and you're smoking, you're putting yourself at a risk for cancer. Does that mean that B12 causes cancer? No. It means that the combination of smoking and really, really high dose B12, which I don't think most people need. I don't think you need 5 milligrams. Some people may have really bad genetic issues. I have a lot of genetic issues with B12, but I don't take 5 milligrams. I take like 1 milligram in divided doses to saturate the blood, because I don't even think 5 milligrams you can absorb all that at once. So anyway, that's the problem. And the body doesn't absorb it, so it just floats around and it causes more problems if you're smoking. So these types of research are very prevalent, and you always have to read between the lines, because the conclusions that are drawn, especially from people who are biased against supplements, are often not correct. So they have to look at the whole thing. You have to read in context, just like you do with the Bible. Or they don't factor in like nutrient pairs, because everything has to be in pairs, calcium, magnesium, zinc and copper are in pair. And there's all kinds of pairs between, like B6, B9, B12, they all work together. Everything is designed synergistically in the sense that they work with each other. And you have to understand nutrient pairs. So you have to learn to read scientific literature and interpret conclusions. I talk about that in the book. You also have to build your health team with people that you trust for different things. And there's an article on that in the book as well. At the end of the day, there's a lot of good research out there. There really is. There's also some misinformation, or there's studies that are just poor quality that lend themselves to stupid conclusions, like, oh, vitamin B12 gives you cancer. It doesn't. I have a whole article explaining that in the book. In the end, if you stick to the basics, the only question is the sourcing and the reputability of the company, because that's another issue, because these companies, we'll talk about this in a second, but with companies like on Amazon, you have to be careful that you're getting it from the right company. And some of these things, I think recently I saw a video on creatine gummies. They tested a bunch of these creatine gummies on Amazon, and most of them didn't even have creatine in them. The powders seemed to be fine, but the creatine gummies were all basically fake. So there's that to deal with. And of course, if you have a reputable company and you're buying it from them directly, then obviously the risk for that is little to none. But this is the problem. The day and age we live in, it's an age of deception and toxins and all kinds of nonsense. Another thing is this. I have a lot of knowledge and experience with myself, but again, I'm not a clinician. I've said that before. I know what works. I know in general what the body needs, but health isn't something that you can put into a static formula for everybody. Depending on your genes and everything else, you may need more or less of a given nutrient. Especially if you have years of damage to undo from toxins, from lifestyle choices, you need to have a good clinician and somebody to guide you with the process. There are many great experts out there that focus on specific issues like weight loss, diabetes, thyroid problems, autoimmune issues, digestive issues, and so on. And you can access that through my functional medicine team article. I'll give you some places to start. Of course, my goal here is to help you with the basics so that you have a foundation regardless of the thing that you need to pursue, whether that's autoimmune issues or digestive or thyroid or whatever else. You still have to have a foundation of vitamins and minerals and nutrition and diet principles, how to eat properly, how to exercise, all of the things I'm covering today. This is your foundation that you build on top of with specialized work. And also, the goal is to help educate you so that you participate in these meetings with these professionals on a mature level. Even the best doctors are always going to be busy. They have a clinic to run. They try to systematize things, and even a good doctor is still trying to get things done. Okay, so unless you can understand your problem and converse with them on a mature level and direct their focus, then you risk coming in there, twiddling your thumbs and saying, oh, I feel this, and then they're directing your focus, and they may give you something that isn't relevant. Or they may be too conservative with something. Well, let's try this. It's like, no, I've already tried that. I know that's not going to work because X, Y, Z. Let's do something more aggressive, and so on, right? So you don't want to waste your time. You want to be a mature player. Health is not about the model where you go to the doctor, you're this ignorant little stooge, and the doctor's like, okay, this is what we got to do. You have something ISIS. We're going to diagnose you with this. Here's the medication. There you go. You're off and you'll do well. No, health is a dance. Of course, the doctor is the clinician. He's the one with the knowledge and the wisdom, but that doesn't mean you are completely ignorant. So you have to be educated so that you can have mature conversations with these people and, basically not waste hundreds and hundreds of dollars and hours of your time, going from one doctor to another without understanding the actual issue and understanding how it's like AI, really. And AI has become a very interesting tool because it can summarize all these perspectives and you can converse with it. With AI, you have to understand how to prompt AI. Well, it's the same thing with a doctor. You got to understand, how do I prompt my doctor? How do I explain exactly what I want, what I've done, what the issue is, what I think will work and what I think won't? And there's a dance between that, right? Because the doctor is the one that's the expert. You're not the expert, but at the same time, you're also not somebody that's a pushover and just sitting there and, just receiving, right? So this is very important. Nevertheless, supplementing, I believe, is absolutely necessary in today's world. And having a comprehensive plan of vitamins and minerals should be part of your foundation, regardless of whatever you do, because that's something that everybody needs to do on a basic level. Now, when I say supplementing, in quotation marks, I do not mean fancy supplements, anti-aging supplements, herbs, hyped up things of this nature. I'm talking about the basic components: vitamins, minerals, enzymes like digestive enzymes, antioxidants, probiotics, amino acids, and fatty acids. All of these are your basic pillars. Everybody needs these for basic life. You cannot live without vitamins, minerals, enzymes, antioxidants, probiotics, amino acids, fatty acids. You can't live without any of those. All of those are basic building blocks. I am not talking about the fluff. Okay, there's the basics and then there's the fluff. I'm not saying the fluff is bad, but it's not your foundation. What is the fluff? Well, things like herbs, things like new compounds that are discovered like urolithin A or flavonoids or expensive specialized supplements, experimental anti-aging things like rapamycin, metformin, stem cells, expensive supplements like carbon-60, telomerase modifiers like TA65, fad detoxers like extracts, shilajit, charcoal. These are fads, folks. These are fluff. And they have their place every now and then. Some of them maybe not, but they have their place eventually, but they're not your foundation. So build your foundation first with vitamins, minerals, enzymes, antioxidants, probiotics, amino acids, fatty acids. Understand how to construct a basic nutrition program. See my article, 7 Pillars of Optimal Health, because it guides you through the entire process of doing all of that and gives you specific suggestions that I use as well. In general, you want to focus on things that have maximum benefit and minimal risk. The basics that I just mentioned in the first category are things that have maximum benefit and minimal risk and low cost. But they're also slow and they need to be done consistently. You're not going to get shredded and jacked by taking amino acids. I wish that was the case. Just take a little sip and boom, your pecs just pop out. Yeah, it's not going to happen, okay? Or omega-3 or magnesium or whatever else. You're not going to get shredded, okay? However, if you take these things every day for months, you are going to see major improvements in your health overall. Your overall recovery is going to get better. Your health and vitality is going to improve, and it's going to maintain your health. That's very important. Fluff are things that are potentially good and useful and powerful, but they have a higher risk and they have a higher cost. But it's also faster. You can see results quicker. Things like herbs, fancy compounds, these things are like medication, basically, right? So they can have faster results, but they also have higher risk because they're working on a higher level processes. The vitamins, minerals, all these things, these are basic building blocks. Your body knows what to do with these, and it organizes these into more complex things like hormones and things down the line. But if you're taking things that directly modify hormones, like herbs, now or neurotransmitters like dopamine or serotonin, now you're in the realm of medication. Whether it's natural or not, you're in the realm of medication, and so you have to be very careful with these types of things. Or pathways in the body like AMPK and all these, like people are taking metformin for its anti-aging benefits because they've realized that it turns on the AMPK pathway, which is basically your fasting pathway, right? Where you have to think like your body has certain switches, okay? Think of it like a switch. One switch is mTOR, like growing and getting stronger and building muscle. The other is AMPK, which is like, oh, I'm going to conserve. I'm going to, basically not grow because I need to, save my resources right now. Both of them are useful. You got yin and yang, male and female, up and down, left and right. Okay, God has given both of those things. But when you're taking metformin, it's artificially telling your body not to grow. So it's engaging some of these longevity genes and things like that. But metformin is a diabetes drug, okay? It's not something you should be taking. People taking it for anti-aging benefits, but there's also a lot of risks to it, like vitamin B12 deficiency. I think Dave Asprey was dealing with that for a while. But anyway, nevertheless, you have the basics, which are slow growth, and then you have fluff, which can be good, but they also have high risk. So you have to evaluate these things very carefully. You need essential fatty acids, you need essential amino acids, you need vitamins, you need minerals, you need all these things. These are building blocks. You don't need herbs, okay? Can herbs be useful? Absolutely. But you don't need herbs. You need the building blocks first. And then once you have that plan set, then you can explore specific interventions using more targeted supplements. On my health store, I have some very fancy supplements. They're not like high risk or anything, like Fatty 15. Fatty 15 is an amazing supplement with a ton of research. You can read my article on it in the Powerhouse Fats, Omega-3 and Fatty 15. It's been a recently discovered fatty acid. It's actually from dairy fat. And they've been able to put it in a pill, which is phenomenal because it has some very, very fascinating recovery aspects to it. There's no risk to it. But that's a specialized supplement. It's not something I would recommend that you take right away until you have these other things included. Now, Fatty 15 there's more and more research on it saying that maybe it is an essential fatty acid like omega-3. So in that sense, it could be part of a standard nutrition program regardless of what you do. But nevertheless, it's an added cost, right? It's another $40-$50 a month. So the question is, what can I cover with that? If my budget is $100 a month, right? What can I cover? Well, if you get a fancy anti-aging supplement, there's your budget gone right away. But if you want to spend $100 at Swanson Vitamins and get some chelated magnesium, some chelated zinc, some selenium, some chromium, some manganese, all these basic minerals, and maybe a B vitamin supplement, you can get all that stuff for $100, probably around there, versus, spending maybe $50 on Fatty 15 and, another $50 on another supplement. Now you have two supplements. You get it? So everything has to be weighed according to your budget and your goals. But nevertheless, in general, you want to focus on the things that are low risk, high reward, high applicability to all parts of your body. And that way your body has all of these building blocks and it's constantly being able to repair and undo the damage that is being done because you're always being basically assaulted. And it all boils down to this, folks. It all boils down to cellular nutrition. Cellular nutrition. How is the quality of your cells? The cells that you have, individual cells have membranes in them. And those membranes, every like blood cells every 90 to 120 days, right? You get a new set of blood cells or a new wave of them. So that means that if you're eating crappy food, inflammatory fats, oxidated omega-6 fats, things like this of this nature, your body is working with what you give it. Okay, if you give it crappy bricks, it's going to build crappy buildings, right? Because that's what it has. And that's why you're going to have more inflammation. That's why your nutrient absorption is not going to be the best. more autoimmune issues, everything else. So it all comes down to the quality of your cells. That's why these building blocks, essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, all these things are so basic so that you can have quality cells, and your cell turnover creates quality nutrition in the cellular matrix. So the membranes of your cells are the key for minimizing inflammation and disease and everything else, because that's where it begins, inflammation. And it's called inflammaging, actually, is what the word is. But nevertheless, my goal with anybody, regardless of what their condition is to get you on some kind of nutrition plan with vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, as much as your budget will allow. And of course, that's different for everybody. So that way, you can make informed decisions and basically minimize your inflammation. Now, a couple of basic principles with health in general that apply to everything, but especially supplements. Optimal health is a narrow road. Too much or too little is always the question. This is the dance of life. With my own HPA issues that I'm dealing with, plus my hypersensitivity of my nervous system from being, a high intensity athlete for many years, I constantly swing between exhaustion and too much energy. Hopefully that'll balance out. But in my case, things like adrenal boosters, vitamin B5, things I mentioned before, will really make me wired immediately. So I have to take a very tiny amount if I do, because my body's very responsive. Also, certain herbs like rhodiola that are very good and adaptogenic for stress also boost dopamine. This is why I have a whole article on herbs and how to be careful with them. Because some of these things, if you take them, they may have a good effect on one thing, but the herbs are always like a double-edged blade. So you have to investigate every herb. And depending on your genetic issues, you may not want to take that herb. In my case, I have plenty of dopamine, and I'm a slow metabolizer. So what that means is if I have coffee, if I have things that are dopamine generating, it can eventually lead to insomnia at night because I have too much dopamine in my brain. So I don't take those things. In fact, one time I was taking oregano oil, which is an extract, carvacrol or something like that, is the extract from oregano oil. And that's actually used for gut imbalance. It's an antimicrobial to kill off bad bugs. However, to my lovely surprise, it is also a dopamine booster. In fact, people have treated depression with oregano oil. You can look into it. It's very fascinating because of its dopamine boosting effects. So lo and behold, I was taking this thing for a couple days and then I started getting insomnia. I'm like, what the hell is giving me insomnia? I'm literally auditing all my supplements. And now I find out that, it's the dopamine. Of course, nowadays you have AI, which is great because then you can plug all that information in and tell me which one of these is likely to give me insomnia. So you have that as well. But nevertheless, everybody's different. So you have to watch everything that you take and you have to understand what you're doing. So finding the right balance is very important, especially if you have issues where you're dealing with HPA issues like I do, or your nervous system is overregulated or oversensitive, or you're just an oversensitive person, like people are chemically sensitive. This can be a real narrow road dance. But optimal health is a narrow road and it's a constant dance. Another thing to keep in mind is there's biphasic response on practically everything. What is a biphasic response? Well, bi means two, phasic means phase, two phases, meaning something is useful at a particular dosage, then it becomes negative at a different dosage. Great example is iodine. Iodine is vital for life, but if you get too much, it can shut down your thyroid. This is why it's important to understand therapeutic levels of nutrients. And I have an article on that as well. The RDA, the recommended daily amount, is not based on optimal health. It's based on basically avoiding disease. So for you may need more than the RDA of a particular nutrient. And some of them are a little more accurate than others. For example, magnesium. If you're taking 400 milligrams of magnesium, which is the RDA, you're doing all right. My personal preference is around 600 for the average person. Of course, if you're a bigger person, if you're heavier, whatever else, you may need more. But in general, magnesium 400 milligrams is closer to optimal health than, for example, the B vitamin RDAs. The B vitamin RDAs are very, very low for optimal health. Vitamin C is very, very low for optimal health, especially with all the inflammation that we have. Or if you have surgery, vitamin C goes through the roof, the demand for vitamin C. So it's constantly, there's always something that is shifting. The body can handle much more than what we've been told it needs. And it needs a lot more for repair if there are chronic issues. If you have an injury, if you have, damage, inflammation, toxins, things like that. That's why it's important to find the smallest effective dose. What is the smallest effective dose that you can get the result? Everyone is different with these things. Everyone's got different genetics, different sensitivities, and finding the right dose often can be a practice and adjusting over time. I'll give you another example, vitamin D. I have VDR issues. VDR is the gene that handles vitamin D metabolism. You can find these out through genetic tests very easily. But vitamin D, I lived also in Arizona my whole life, okay? So plenty of sunshine, which, by the way, the sun does not give you significant amounts of vitamin D, not that I'm aware of, even in healthy people. So you should be taking a vitamin D supplement. The first time that I ever measured vitamin D, and I was already taking 600% of the RDI for vitamin D, and I had been doing that for several years, I believe. And I've been living in Arizona for like 20-something years, because I was 20-something when I first got my vitamin D checked. My vitamin D was a whopping 19, which is deficient, horribly deficient. Ideal vitamin D levels should be around 70, 75, something like that. I would say anywhere between 65 to 80, I think, is a good number to shoot for. So I took 5,000 units. That didn't really do much. It kind of raised it a little bit, but it just maintained. I took 10,000 units and it increased. I did that for many years, on and off, just trying to see what the dosage was about. And I noticed consistently that with 10,000 units, it would increase and eventually would keep increasing. So you don't want it to be too high. You don't want it to be like 100. So then I dropped to 5,000 and it would actually drop slowly at 5,000 units, which is a lot. I don't know what the RDI for that is, but it's in the 1,000%. So I realized, okay, I'm going to take 7,000. Now I'm going to test and see if 7,000 was the right dose. It probably is. But nevertheless, that is a constant balancing act, and that is different for everybody. Maybe you may need a lot less vitamin D, or you may need a lot more, like me. Also, health is a spectrum, and there are many meaningful thresholds for hormones, nutrients, and so on. We'll talk about this more when we get to the thyroid section, but when I was suppressed with my thyroid because of iodine, I noticed significant levels affecting my heart rhythm based on the hormone levels. At one point, the thyroid had gotten so suppressed that my T4 was like less than 1, which is really, really bad. And that gave me something called SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, which is basically your heart just goes boom, 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 boom. It starts like beating super fast, and then it has like a seizure, basically, which is very scary. And I went to the emergency room, and I had no idea what the heck it was. I researched, I made the correlations with the thyroid hormone, and so on. Lo and behold, somebody was documented in a case study that their T4 levels were affecting their SVT syndromes. And the moment that corrected, I've never had that problem ever since. So, same thing when my thyroid crashed in the spring of this year. It didn't crash nearly as much, but I started to have those skipping beats. And the vagus stimulation was much more prevalent. So, there is a threshold. And like with hormones especially, you will know what that threshold is. Like for me, I'm trying to get back to 3.5 free T3 levels, because I noticed that before everything crashed for me, that was the level I was at when I was feeling pretty decent. So that's my goal, is to get back to that level. And obviously that's been a process. Same thing is with everything else, with blood sugar, with, chemicals that you're taking, magnesium, iodine, everything else. Everything has an optimal range, and anything more or less than that may not be useful. And it takes time to diagnose that over time. In general, the advice that I give you in the 7 Pillars of Optimal Health article is a general safe limit for everybody. It's safe levels. But you may need more or less of a given nutrient depending on your situation. Another thing to keep in mind is diminishing returns. As you optimize your health, it's harder and harder to get progress closer to the optimal. Okay? For example, if you want to lose 100 pounds and you are 400 pounds overweight, right? If you are obese, morbidly obese, you want to lose 100 pounds, 150 pounds, that's very easy to do. You can melt the weight off. There's plenty of cases like that. It's much harder to lose 15 or 20 pounds if you're, 25%, 30% body fat. So you're not morbidly obese, you're overweight at that point, but it's much harder to lose those 15 to 20 pounds than it is to lose 100 if you are 400 pounds. You get it? This also applies to supplements and desensitization. Everything has the logarithmic curve where the diminishing returns after a while happen in everything. And the reason is because the body has receptors on its cells. So again, with vitamin D, when you take a high dose of vitamin D, the body senses that in the blood and it downregulates the expression of these receptors on your cells, right? Because if it didn't, then the cells would take in all that vitamin D and they would overreact and it would be a problem. So it downregulates the receptors so that less is absorbed. And that's the goal. The idea is that you raise your vitamin D levels and then you find the maintenance dose that's required to keep it at that level. That's the case for practically every nutrient. And that takes some research. It's good to start with a baseline that's safe and then investigate to tweak over time through blood tests, through various, maybe a genetic test to get an idea of maybe what your genetic landscape is. And that's a tweaking process. But in general, you can start with some safe amounts for all these things, which I outline in the article, 7 Pillars to Optimal Health, and go from there. But nevertheless, just realize that there are diminishing returns for everything. So when people say, oh, you got to do, 5 milligrams of B12, you don't need that much. You really don't. Again, the body can't really absorb more than 500 to maybe a milligram at most at one time. I take 1 milligram per day. I do 2 little chewable tablets under the tongue, 500 micrograms in divided doses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to have a more consistent dose of B12. And in my case, I have a lot of genetic SNPs when it comes to B12 metabolization. And there's a lot to talk about with that. But nevertheless, I don't think taking these mega doses is necessary. I really don't. So there's that, diminishing returns. Another one is exponential decay or entropy. And that is pretty simple. We live in the Genesis curse. Things are tending towards disorder all the time. But they get more disorderly faster, right? Exponential decay. Because the damage compounds. This is a very important point. This is why the narrow road in optimal health is such a practice and it requires so much discipline. Because, for example, the fatter you get, the fat cells start to make you leptin resistant. They start to increase your estrogen. All of these things impact your metabolism and other hormone imbalances, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter. The fatter you get, the more it impacts your metabolism because the fat cells secrete, all sorts of signaling and it really messes up your metabolism. It's not just like, oh, I have weight that I need to get rid of. No, you're dealing now with signals and hormone issues that are slowing down your metabolism and changing everything. So the fatter you get, the harder it is to get out of the pit. Do you get it? That's why, you have diminishing returns. The closer you get to optimal, the harder it is. And the farther away you get to optimal, the harder even it is to get out of that rut. It's like a quicksand trap. So you have to really have discipline. You have to walk the narrow road because the farther you get away from the optimal, the more difficult it's going to be. The more effort you have to put in. So it's just like with Christianity, with walking the narrow road, right? Every deception that pulls you off the narrow road makes it easier for other deceptions to come in. For example, people believe in the little season theory. So what do? Well, they start to question all of history. Then they start to believe in things like Tartaria, hyperpreterism, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe eventually they'll even get deceived by Gnosticism and totally apostatize. The point is that all these things are connected, and the more you entertain in a particular belief, the more likely you are to be deceived. If you believe in the lunar Sabbath, then you start to believe in the sacred name, then Torah keeping, then pretty much you become a legalist. So all these things are connected, and once you put your foot in one, it starts pulling at you like this and pulling and make it easier to go this way, and pretty soon you get off the narrow road. The same thing is with your health because of exponential decay. The worse things get, the faster they get worse, right? So you have to try to maintain, for better or worse, a good body composition, have a comprehensive nutrition program so your body has nutrients and vitamins and minerals and things of this nature, essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, a regular exercise program, all of these just basic things so that you aren't pulled off the deep end. Because once you get to the deep end, it's a lot more work to get out. That's the point. Another point is quality matters. Just like with the fats and proteins that you eat, which should be ideally grass-fed, pasture-raised, all that stuff. With supplements, it's about bioavailability. Will it be active in your body after it is digested? Will it survive digestion? This is also another reason why there's so much misinformation with research studies, because they don't consider bioavailability. The form of the nutrient makes such a difference. The form of the nutrient can be either pro-inflammatory or it can be anti-inflammatory. If you take iron oxide as a supplement, which you should never do, it is inflammatory. If you take chelated iron because you're anemic, that's a good thing, especially if you're doing Albion chelated nutrition, which we'll talk about. But minerals, for example, need to be chelated. Okay? That's a chelate is basically it's what your body does normally with food. Your body takes the minerals in food and wraps them in a protein so that when the villi of your small intestine interact with that substance, they recognize it as organic and they absorb it into the body and they process that mineral. And that mineral can then go and do what it needs to do, whether it's magnesium or copper or whatever else. That's the way minerals get absorbed. So chelation is a process where the mineral is bound with either lysine or glycine, an amino acid that's very easy to absorb. And it's sold as a supplement. And that's very common these days. Albion is the best in that category. They've had their patented process for chelating minerals for 70 years or something. And they sell through Swanson vitamins particularly, but they also other retailers too. I get a lot of my minerals from there because they're super cheap and they're super high quality. I think it's the best. But nevertheless, vitamins also have specific forms that they need to be in. B6, B9, B12, they need to be methylated because people have MTHFR mutations. MTHFR is a gene, has to do with methylation. And if you don't take methylated versions of these vitamins, you can find out if you have MTHFR SNPs. Take a test for it. Most genetic profiles will give you that information. But if you take B6, B9, B12 that are not methylated, you're doing more harm than good. They're pro-inflammatory and they're not going to be absorbed. So you're wasting your money. So that's where the misinformation on supplements comes from. Oh, you're just peeing out all the expensive supplements. Well, yeah, if you're not taking the right form, it's not being utilized. You are peeing. You are making expensive urine. D3, vitamin D needs to be cholecalciferol, which is animal calciferol, not ergocalciferol, which is plant. Sometimes you look on the back of a drink. I remember when I used to drink a lot of soy products, they would have, it's got vitamin D. And you look on the back, it's like vitamin D as ergocalciferol. Like, what is that? Is that vitamin D? Well, it's plant vitamin D, which is not very bioavailable. Vitamin K2 needs to be MK7, not MK4. MK7 is more expensive, but it's the one that actually does the job. MK4 is the less inferior, or the more inferior one. There's other examples for every situation. So the form of the nutrient counts. That's why, again, there's misinformation in the studies. And people saying you're wasting your money on supplements. Well, no, not really. If you're taking good quality supplements, then you're not wasting your money. You're investing in yourself. There's also certain delivery mechanisms that work better than others. For example, certain situations like curcumin. If you have curcumin powder versus liposomal curcumin, those things can be much better. Glutathione, if you take it as a powder or a pill, it's not very absorbable. But if you take it as a liposome, which I sell in the store, it's much more bioavailable, and that's why it's valuable. Some things are water soluble, meaning they can dissolve in water. Other things are fat soluble. Minerals like chelated magnesium are water soluble. Fat soluble vitamins are DAKKE, and those need to be either taken with food or you need to make sure that the pill itself has like oil or something, some sort of fat that they provide for it to be absorbed. And vitamin C is water soluble. The B vitamins are water soluble, meaning you can take them and you can take high doses of them and they'll basically flush out of your system whatever's not used. Fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D, A, K, and E can accumulate because they're fat soluble. Although I believe with vitamin E that's not the case. Vitamin K has been studied to have very, very high tolerance. People can take up to 1 milligram without any, because vitamin E and K help to balance the thickness of your blood. Vitamin K is a constrictor. Vitamin E is a blood thinner, natural blood thinner. So they both work together. However, the point is, well, if you take too much vitamin K, is it going to give you a stroke? No, not really. You'd have to take quite a lot to do damage. And from my memory, vitamin K has been studied to have up to 1 milligram, because the normal dose is something like 200 micrograms to 400 micrograms. I take 400 micrograms a day. You could take up to 1 milligram a day. And not that you should. I'm not saying you should do that, but the studies have shown that it's got a wide therapeutic window. Vitamin E, I don't believe accumulates. Vitamin A can accumulate. It can become toxic. And vitamin D, that can create some issues if you're not taking other things like magnesium, boron, vitamin K. All these things work together. We'll talk more about these in a little bit. But the point is, always research the quality and the bioavailability based on the form. The form is what matters. The things that I recommend in my articles are always accounting for all of this. They're always accounting for the form and the quality and from a reputable source as much as possible. Obviously, these things are constantly being a matter of research because, like, for example, with Amazon, there's a lot of companies that source their stuff from China, or they don't have certificates of analysis, or, now there's been an issue where some of these are fakes, so on and so forth. So this is an ongoing problem, and you have to make sure you're buying it from the actual store. In certain things, it doesn't matter. I mean, again, do you want to spend $20 on a bag of creatine that is creatine that was probably coming from China and, it's highly rated? Okay, maybe it might have some stuff in it. Or do you want to spend $60 on a bag of creatine? Well, that's up to you, right? So the question is, how much budget do you have and what are you willing to tolerate, right? The reality is you're going to get toxins in your body no matter what, whether it's from the food that you eat, and even from some of the supplements, because even with all the certificates of analysis and all the organic ingredients and everything else, there's always going to be something. There really is. This is a toxic world. Nobody can isolate toxins all the way. Now, again, I'm not saying every supplement you take is toxic, but the likelihood, especially as you're taking a lot of things, the likelihood of some over time is high for anything. And that's just a fact of life. But the positive thing is that as you're taking nutrition into your body can detoxify and get rid of things much easier. So I'm not saying that to be paranoid. I'm saying that it's just being realistic, okay? Some of the things that I use, I get them from Amazon. I get them from the store. I have good reason to believe that they're genuine. They're not fake. But some of those stuff may be sourced from China. It may be. The alternative is double the price. And it's not something I'm personally willing to pay for that particular product. For some things, I'm willing to pay more because I know the quality. I know that I can trust this particular manufacturer and I need it from them. But for other things like creatine, again, creatine, I use bulk supplements, creatine, or I think the last one I bought is from Naked Nutrition, Naked creatine. They're still about the same price. They're relatively affordable. Do they get it from China? I don't know. I think bulk supplements sources it from China, but Naked creatine might not get it from China. I don't know. Even if they do, it doesn't bother me that much. It really doesn't. Other things would bother me, like herbs or things that are grown. Yeah, I don't really trust manufacturing and agricultural practices in China. I don't. But creatine is creatine for the most part. Does that mean that it's totally pure? Well, you can always request the certificate of analysis. And this is a constant journey, folks. It really is. So I'm just telling you to be proactive. Like with the minerals, for example, that I recommend from Swanson Vitamin. Swanson Vitamin is pretty reputable. They use Albion minerals, and Albion is a great name. They're the best as far as, patenting the chelation process. They're the cheapest. The Swanson vitamins, especially when they're on sale, which is all the time, you can get a ton of minerals for $50, just a ton of them. The problem with Swanson, though, is that Swanson's formulation uses Albion, but they have a little bit of maltodextrin in there. Of course, maltodextrin is probably GMO, pesticide rich, who knows? It's only about probably 10 milligrams or so, maybe something like that. But it's still maltodextrin. It's not a completely pure formula. You're not just getting pure magnesium glycinate in a pill and that's it. You get it? And so do you want this cheaper magnesium with the Albion in it, with a little bit of maltodextrin? Or do you want bulk supplements on Amazon, which uses pure magnesium glycinate, no other fillers. It's very affordable, relatively speaking. Probably a little more expensive actually than the Swanson one when they're on sale, but nevertheless, they're clean, totally clean formulation. But they get it from China. Which one do you get? Well, I don't know. I'm getting the Albion one because I know Albion I can trust. And I'm okay with the minor amount of maltodextrin in it. Maybe for you that may be an issue. So this is the journey that you're on with these things. Eventually, I would love to have the resources to make my own supplements at that point, right? But until that point in time, you have to do your research. You have to be able to make trade-offs because there's never a perfect situation. There's always something. And even if you find the perfect product that's super clean, it's expensive. And if you have a limited budget, then you have to figure out, well, how does this fit into my nutrition plan? Right? This is the dance of life. There's other brands that are all made in the USA. They're super clean profiles, but again, they are very expensive. And if your budget is $100, $150, maybe even $200, and you have a product that is $60 or $20, well, that makes a big difference because the difference of $40 you could spend on other things that you need, like minerals or vitamins and so on. So it's a constant balancing act. You can use the AI like ChatGPT to research and summarize reviews, sourcing, certificate of analysis status, formulations, what people have said. You can use that for your research. So that's something I recommend doing. Again, it's a dance between cheap and clean based on what you can tolerate, based on your budget. The recommendations that I put in my articles are thoroughly researched. They're striking a balance between affordable. I've tried to put them as affordable as possible and reputable. So it is what it is. Feel free to fact check everything I do. But nevertheless, another thing I wanted to mention is I want you to think of your body like a business. This is very important for health. What you can measure, you can act on. And I learned this very early on with that nutritionist that I worked with after my panic disorder. Of course, you can get lost in analytical measuring and become OCD, which is the imbalance, right, of taking only one perspective. But it's a dance. You have to take ownership of your health, and you have to see the changes that you want to make. You have to measure, you have to create a foundation and understand where you're going. That doesn't mean being OCD, but it also doesn't mean being complacent. There's a lot of apps that you can use these days. I just use a spreadsheet and make my own spreadsheets, but there's a lot of apps that track your calories, you can even breathe into these things and it can tell you what your metabolism needs that day. There's so many tracking apps and devices. My advice to you is not to pick one over the other, but just to do something, to track whatever you want to change. So think of your body like a business. When you have a business, what do? Hopefully, you track the input, you track the output, your costs, your marketing, everything that you do so that you understand, how is my business going? Is it going up? Is it going down? Right? Are things efficient or are they not efficient? So this is the same way for your health. You have to work preventively. You need to have some basic tracking skills and basic tracking devices that you use. I use spreadsheets for various things. Like, for example, I tracked my sleep quality, what I ate, what supplements I took, etc. for several months to see if there was a pattern with all the HPA nonsense that I was dealing with. I also tracked my body weight and my body fat percentage and my muscle mass to see if my interventions in the last few months were making a difference in losing weight. Did my walking 8 to 10,000 steps a day make a difference? Did adjusting my meal plan make a difference? Right? Did going to the gym consistently make a difference? Did it make a difference? And it did make a slight difference, but it's slow, again, because you have diminishing returns. I have a health folder in my computer with all my health tests that I've ever taken. They're organized by date, so I can always reference them if I need to. I have a table of my thyroid results over the last 20 years where I know exactly where the fluctuations have been, what have been the ranges of my hormones, when I've been healthy, when I've been not. So I know what my baseline is, so I know what the patterns are. Now, you don't have to do all of that, but you do have to have some basic organizational skills. You have to have some basic spreadsheet skills and keep track of what's important to you so that you understand whether something is working, right? How do you know if an intervention is working or not, right? If I'm taking an anti-inflammatory supplement, or if I'm taking a regime or a program or whatever, like the ultimate health stack that I've outlined for you. If you're going to do that, how do you know if it's going to work? Well, you need a baseline evaluation of all your inflammatory markers, and then you need another evaluation afterward to see what worked and how much. So the point of tracking is not just to track. It's to see patterns so that you can make good decisions. Once you start seeing the patterns and you understand, you don't have to track as hard anymore. I used to track all my calories and everything else. Now I just know when I look at a piece of food, I know in general what the glycemic impact is. In general, I know what kind of calories it has. I know what kind of carbs and fat and fiber it has. So I know. They may not be exact, but I have a general understanding of like, okay, this is a little more fat than I need right now. This is a little too much carbs. This is a little, whatever. So I know. And now I don't have to track those things anymore. So that's the point of tracking. Is it's not for the sake of tracking. It's, tracking for the sake of tracking is neuroticism. Okay, it's a neural problem. Tracking for the sake of understanding a pattern and then letting go of it is a tool. It's a useful thing. Another thing is this: consistency is the key in anything in life. There's a video that I've shown before of a tortoise and a hare, literally like in a physical situation. These people are racing a bunny and a turtle. And it's some, like, I think in Korea somewhere, or some China, I don't know, Japan, bunch of Asian people there. And it's so funny because literally the tortoise is like going slowly, just chugging away. It's just totally focused on the outcome. And the rabbit's like, whoosh, 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 really quick. It goes almost to the end and then just stops. And it looks around, super cute little chunky rabbit, just looking around. And then the tortoise is going past it, and everybody's like, come on. And so, of course, the turtle ends up winning, and the rabbit ends up losing, literally just like the cartoon, which is so funny. But this is the point. Consistency is the key. So it's better to make successive, slow improvements than to have dramatic shifts or crazy results very quickly. It really is. So you have to get out of the mindset of, I need to have a crazy result really quickly, and more into, okay, how do I change my habits? How do I have new actions? How do I have a new identity, a new way of being with my health? How do you think about food? How do you think about your body? How do you think about your weight? How do you think about these things and your daily discipline? So it's all about consistency, whether it's supplementation, dieting, exercise. You have to fall in love with the process, and you have to commit to something. You have to commit to something. Create a goal that's measurable. SMART goals, right? SMART goals. If you don't know what that is, look it up. SMART goals. It has to be measurable, it has to be relevant, it has to be actionable, time-bound. I forget what the S is right now, but anyway, SMART goals. You have to have SMART goals. And those are reachable, identifiable goals. Then measure your progress and make it real for yourself. Make it real for yourself so that it's real. If it's just in your head, oh, I need to lose weight, or I don't feel good, or whatever else, okay, great. Now let's get a goal. What would you like? I would like to lose X amount of weight. Okay, great. What's the plan for that? Well, I need to revamp my diet. I need to do this. Well, let me measure first. Get a Tanita scale that measures your bioimpedance and tells you what your body fat percentage is. So then keep a track record of what you're doing and your body fat and how it changes week to week, and see. And if after 4 weeks, if you're making a bunch of changes and you don't see any change, that means that you need to change differently. You need to do something different. These are the ways that we have to think, folks. It's, again, changing about how you think and see your interdependence between your outer and your inner, right? The outer of a person is the reflection of their inner, right? Your inner discipline, it reflects outward through your body and shapes your body. And of course, everybody has different situations. You may have a genetic issue with your thyroid or you maybe had your thyroid removed, or some kind of crazy thing that's really made it hard to have an external result. I get that. But the point is that we should always be pursuing excellence in life. I believe that. And that's a fine dance because obviously we're not in control, but nevertheless, from our perspective, we should always pursue excellence. Supplements also are very important. And again, you can look at my 7 pillars of optimal health for a lot of detail in that regard. But things that everybody should be taking are the following. These are just a simple overview. Again, if you want a comprehensive nutrition plan, please look at the 7 Pillars article. But you need magnesium. That's needed for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. You need B vitamins because they're needed for energy, for focus, metabolism, nerve functions. You need vitamins DAKE, D-A-K-E. They're the fat-soluble vitamins. They're supportive for a variety of different issues. You need other minerals like selenium, zinc, chromium, manganese, boron, and iodine. These are all critical for health in various ways. And you need other nutrients that can help to have a broad anti-inflammatory effect, and they're natural nutrients. Things like taurine, glycine, phosphatidylcholine. These are all very cheap, and they have very broad anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, adaptive effects with very little to no side effects. I go over how to do this in the article, so make sure you check it out. But nevertheless, all of these are very cheap. What I just listed, you could probably, with a budget of $100, you can get most of these things, maybe all of them, if you get them on sale and so on. So you don't need a lot of money. You just need some discipline to do it. And I go over how to do that in the article over there. So make sure you check it out. I use a weekly pill box. Oh gosh, here we go. 1 second. This is what it looks like. It's cited in the article. If you're listening to this, then it's just like one of these big jumbo, pill boxes. It's a plastic pill box. It looks like this, and it's made for a week. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, rooms or little holes or whatever you can put your pills in. But I don't use it for the week. I have 7 of these, and I use 1 for each day because I need to split these up in different times. Now, why is that the case? The case is because I don't take a multivitamin. I don't believe in multivitamins. Multivitamins are a waste of time because they are not accounting. You can't control the dosages in multivitamins, and a lot of nutrients can sometimes conflict for absorption. So you can't just take a bunch of stuff and hope that your body's going to figure it out. Certain things need to be set apart from each other. Like for example, if you take a lot of calcium and zinc at the same time, it can mess up the absorption of the zinc. So this is what it is. And certain things are synergistic with each other. But the main issue with multivitamins is you can't control the dosage. I don't like that because I'm a control freak. So I like to separate everything in sections. So what these sections represent are different times. For example, in the morning, I have powder amino acids, but right now these are amino acid pills that I've been taking. Right on waking, actually, I take my liposomal I talk about this in the Ultimate Health Stack. I take the liposomal glutathione and NAD in the morning. 30 minutes later, I take the amino acids and some, empty stomach pills like NAC, TMG, B vitamins, things that can get absorbed really quickly. Then I eat breakfast, and then I take my first set of pills after breakfast. Then I eat lunch, and I take pills after that. There's a little snack, or just take them on an empty stomach. That's dinner. And then there's the probiotics that I take at the very end of the day. So there's 7 sets of pills that I take throughout the day. Again, this is crazy for most people. I don't think you need to do this. I think it is very good because it's optimized for efficiency, bioavailability, and getting nutrition throughout the day as much as possible. Because again, your body can only handle so much at a certain time. So I'm very picky about timing. This is the result of 20 years of taking supplements, okay? But I do 7 of these. I set them on Sunday. I set all my pills on Sunday, and then I have them for the rest of the day. When the day comes, I just take one of these out, open it up, pop it in, and drink it, and you're good to go. So that's what I use to organize all of this stuff. You may find a different way of doing it. I think you should have a pill box of some kind, and I think you should set your pill boxes for the rest of the week on one day of the week because it saves you time. And it ensures that you're going to do it. If you do it every single day, then, I forgot to do my pills. It's too much to worry about. I just won't take them today. Then you're not going to have consistent results. And if you're not consistent, then how can you understand your progress? Do you get it? If you're taking pills every other day or, whatever, you missed your 2 days or 3 days or whatever, you're not going to understand whether what you just did has impacted your inflammation or your goal or whatever else in a meaningful way. So you have to be consistent. And part of that, a great book actually is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. How to make your habits like when you have a new habit and you're trying to make it likely for you to do that habit, you have to follow certain triggers to make it available. You have to make it easy. Sometimes you can stack it with other things that you do already that are already ingrained in your mind. All these are easy strategies to make a new habit stick. Because that's the key, is making a new habit stick. And the book is actually a very good book on how to do that. Very timeless information. But 2 of those things are making it easy and making it available. So by making the pills on Sunday, putting them in front of me, they're there, they're good to go. I just take them and I do it. I prepare that every week. So hopefully these things will help you, but supplements are something that everybody should be doing, and you should be on a nutrition plan like I just described. How much you take of each, I describe in the article. And again, that could be slightly different for you based on some genetic things that you may find out later, but nevertheless, supplementation is very important. Now, onward to part 2, diet.
Healthy